My sister slept with my ex, got pregnant, and my family demanded I give up my inheritance. But I refused and took them to court. I'm 24 now, but this whole mess began a couple of years ago. Back then, I was in this relationship with a guy I met in college. Let's call him Jake. We hit it off pretty quickly. He seemed nice, thoughtful, and we had a lot in common. At first, things were going great. I mean, I was head over heels for him, and I thought this was the guy I was going to marry one day. So naturally, after about a year together, I decided it was time to introduce him to my family. Now, my family's a little, let's say, traditional. We're from a pretty conservative culture, and they have strong opinions about who you should date, how you should date, and when you should get married. They weren't thrilled when they met Jake. It wasn't like they were rude to him or anything, but I could tell they didn't really like him either. They didn't say much, just kind of gave me that, "Are you sure about this guy?" look. I brushed it off, thinking they'd come around eventually. But here's the thing. While my parents were lukewarm about him, my sisters seemed to love him. Grace, who's 22, and Emma, who's only 11, got along with him great. That made me happy because, family approval matters, even if it's just my sisters. Grace especially seemed to really enjoy his company, and we even joked that she was stealing my boyfriend. Emma adored him too, but she's just a kid, so it didn't feel weird. Jake and I didn't live together because, in my culture, that's a huge no-no unless you're married. So, we worked in different cities and would meet up when we could. But I thought things were solid between us. I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my boyfriend, and he seemed to get along with the people closest to me. What could go wrong, right? Well, 3 months after Jake met my family, things took a turn. I was over at his place for the weekend. We'd had a normal day, nothing special, grabbed food, watched a movie, the usual. He went to take a shower, and his phone buzzed. Now, I'm not the type to go snooping through someone's phone. I really believe that if you trust someone, there's no need for that. But something that day just didn't sit right with me. His phone kept buzzing, and I don't know why, but I picked it up. Maybe part of me already knew something was off, or maybe I was just curious. When I unlocked it, I saw a message from Grace. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, she's my sister. But when I opened the chat, my heart basically stopped. The messages weren't normal. They were flirty, like let's hook up level flirty. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, my sister and my boyfriend. I started scrolling up through the conversation, and it got worse. There were months of this stuff, late-night messages, inside jokes that I didn't know about, and even plans to meet up behind my back. I felt sick. Like, how long had this been going on? The person I trusted most and my own sister? I took screenshots of everything. My hands were shaking, and I couldn't think straight, but I knew I needed proof. I sent the screenshots to myself and just left his place without saying a word. I didn't wait for him to get out of the shower. I didn't give him the chance to explain or lie to me. I just bolted. As soon as I got home, my phone started blowing up with calls and texts from Jake. He must have realized something was wrong when he saw that I'd left. I ignored everything. I couldn't even look at my phone without wanting to scream. Eventually, I sent the screenshots to our friend group's chat and blocked him. I didn't care about the fallout at that point. I was done. I had no patience for lies or betrayal. But what hit me the hardest was Grace. I mean, Jake's betrayal hurt like hell, but Grace? That was another level of pain. She wasn't just my sister. We grew up practically inseparable. With our parents being absent and wrapped up in their own world most of the time, Grace and I had always leaned on each other. We were only 2 years apart, and we had always been there for each other, or so I thought. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a bag and flew straight back home to confront her. I didn't care what kind of scene I was about to make. This was bigger than just a fight. It felt like my whole world was crashing down. When I walked into my parents' house, Grace was there, like nothing had happened, just sitting at the kitchen table scrolling on her phone. I slammed the screenshots down on the table in front of her. Our mom and dad were both there too. Grace didn't even try to deny it. She just looked at the messages and shrugged, like it was no big deal. She actually said, "Yeah, I did it." So what? I wanted to scream. How could she act like this didn't matter? Like she hadn't just destroyed our relationship for good. My mom lost it. She slapped Grace across the face, something I had never seen her do. My dad was furious too, yelling at Grace, telling her to get out of the house. He gave her a week to move out, and I thought that was it. I thought maybe this was the end of all the drama. But 2 days later, Grace dropped another bomb on us. She was pregnant with Jake's baby. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This had gone from bad to worse in a matter of days. My parents, who had been so angry with her, suddenly softened up. They couldn't stay mad at her once they knew she was pregnant, and just like that, the whole dynamic shifted. It was like Grace was off the hook just because she was having a baby. My parents started talking about how they couldn't abandon her now, how they had to support her no matter what she did. That's when I snapped. I told them all exactly what I thought, how they were enabling her, how this was all messed up. They tried to tell me to calm down, that I was overreacting, but I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my stuff, told them to never contact me again, and I left. The only one I didn't block was Emma. She's just a kid, and I didn't want to cut her off too. 2 weeks later, my mom somehow got a new number and sent me a wedding invitation. Jake and Grace were getting married, and my mom had the nerve to act like I should be there for family unity or whatever. I told her to get lost and blocked her again. That's how it all began. I thought the worst was behind me, but little did I know, the real mess was only getting started. After all that went down with Grace, my ex, and my parents, I thought cutting them off would give me some peace. Turns out, life had other plans. I wasn't speaking to anyone except Emma, and I was trying to just move forward with my life, you know? But of course, things never go that smoothly when you've got a family like mine. About 2 months after I blocked everyone, I started hearing things through the grapevine. A cousin of mine, who I stayed in touch with, mentioned that Grace was having a baby shower, and my parents were throwing it. Apparently, they had invited a ton of people, like it was some huge celebration. At first, I wasn't surprised. I figured they'd make a big deal about it since they were acting like Grace was some kind of victim. But then my cousin hit me with something that really got under my skin. She told me they had started telling people that I was the one who abandoned the family, and Grace was the good daughter who was trying to keep the family together. Seriously? After everything she did, she was somehow the hero of this story now? I was so mad I wanted to call my mom and just let her have it. But I knew better than to get dragged back into all that. I stayed quiet, tried to keep my head down. But that didn't mean I wasn't fuming on the inside. The nerve they had to spin this whole thing around like I was the problem. A few days later, I got a text from Emma. She was just giving me an update on how things were going at home, but she also dropped something I wasn't ready for. My mom had apparently been going around telling people that I needed to get married soon, not for any real reason, just because she didn't want people gossiping about how Grace, the younger sister, was getting married and having a kid before me. Like, what? I hadn't even spoken to them in months, and now they were worried about my reputation? It was ridiculous, but that's how my mom's mind worked. Everything was about appearances. She didn't care about what Grace did to me. No, the bigger issue was how it looked to other people. I wasn't living my life on her timeline, and that was apparently some huge scandal. Yeah, that made me furious, but more than that, it made me sad. It was like nothing I ever did was going to be enough for them. Even when I cut them off, they still found a way to control the narrative, to make me look like the bad guy. So, fast forward a bit. Grace's wedding happened. Obviously I didn't go, but I heard all about it from my cousin. Apparently it was this big, fancy thing. My parents went all out, even though Grace was barely a few months pregnant. They made sure to cover up the whole scandal by telling everyone they were just being responsible, getting married quickly so the baby wouldn't be born out of wedlock. My cousin told me my parents were telling everyone I didn't show up because of work commitments. Yeah, right. But you know what really hit me hard? It wasn't just that they were lying to cover up their own embarrassment. It was that they were still pretending everything was perfect, like they couldn't even admit that their family was falling apart. They couldn't just be real about what was happening. Instead, they had to put on this fake show for everyone else. I was done with them at this point, but hearing about all this still stung. It was like they were erasing me from the family narrative completely. Anyway, time passed, and I tried to move on. I threw myself into work and focused on building a life for myself. For a while, things were quiet. I wasn't hearing much from my family, and I figured maybe they had finally just left me alone, but of course that's not how it works in my family. One night, I got a call from Emma. It was late, and I was about to go to bed. But something about the way the phone rang gave me a bad feeling. When I picked up, Emma was crying. She could barely get the words out, but eventually she told me that our dad had passed away. I was stunned. I mean, I didn't have the best relationship with him, but still, he was my dad. What really pissed me off, though, was that it was Emma who had to call me. My mom didn't even bother. I hadn't heard a word from her. Emma told me that our dad had been sick for a while, but they hadn't told me. My mom decided to keep it from me because she didn't want to stress me out. Can you believe that? My own father was sick, and they didn't think I had the right to know. The next morning, I booked a flight back home. I didn't care about all the drama anymore, I just wanted to be there for Emma. When I showed up at my parents' house, it was like walking into a battlefield. My mom and Grace were there, and the first thing they did when they saw me was start yelling. They accused me of only coming back for the money, like that was the only reason I'd want to be there. Grace was especially nasty, calling me selfish, saying I abandoned them when they needed me most. I didn't even get the chance to grieve. Everyone was so focused on the inheritance, on who was getting what, that they barely even talked about Dad. It was disgusting, and as if things weren't bad enough, when they read the will, all hell broke loose. Turns out, Dad had left me the largest share of his assets. I was shocked. I wasn't expecting anything from him, especially after how things had gone down. But there it was in writing. I got 40%, Emma got 30%, Mom got 20%, and Grace, she got 10%. You'd think I'd feel relieved, right? Like finally some justice. But honestly, it just made things worse. Grace and her husband lost it. They started demanding that I give up my share, saying I didn't deserve it, that Grace needed the money more because of her kid. They even threatened to take me to court over it. I knew they didn't have a legal leg to stand on, but the fact that they were willing to go that far just showed how greedy they were. It was all about money to them. They didn't care about family or what was right. They just wanted to get their hands on whatever they could. I told them I wasn't giving up anything, and that's when things got nasty. Grace's husband started making threats, saying I'd regret it if I didn't do what they wanted. I knew it was all just talk, but still, it was unsettling. I was already dealing with the loss of my dad, and now I had to put up with this crap on top of it. It was too much. After the will reading, I went back to my hotel to clear my head. I thought about everything that had happened, all the lies, the betrayal, the greed. And I realized something. I wasn't going to let them push me around anymore. I'd spent too long letting my family control my life, and it was time to stand up for myself. Update 1. So after the whole inheritance blow up, I thought things couldn't possibly get worse. I mean, they already accused me of coming back just for the money, and Grace and her husband were trying to bully me into giving up my share. But I wasn't going to budge. I knew I had the legal right to what my dad left me, and honestly, after everything they put me through, there was no way I was giving in. Anyway, a couple of days after the will reading, I got a message from my lawyer. We had a meeting scheduled to go over some more details about the estate, and honestly, I just wanted to get it over with. I was tired of all the drama, and just wanted to settle everything so I could go back to my life. But when I got to the lawyer's office, he hit me with something I wasn't expecting. Turns out, my dad had written me a letter before he passed away. The lawyer handed it to me, and said that my dad had asked him to give it to me when the time was right. I sat there for a minute, just staring at the envelope, not sure if I even wanted to open it. I had so many mixed feelings about my dad. Like, yeah, he left me the largest share in the will, but he also never really stood up for me when all the crap with Grace went down. I was angry with him, but at the same time, I missed him. It's hard to explain. So, I finally opened the letter. It wasn't long, just a couple of paragraphs, but what he said kind of hit me. He apologized for not being there for me when I needed him. He said he knew he should have done more, but he felt trapped by the situation with my mom and Grace. He admitted he had regrets, especially about how things ended between us. Reading that, I didn't know whether to cry or be angry. Part of me felt a little bit of closure, but another part of me was just pissed that he didn't say any of this while he was alive. After reading the letter, the lawyer and I went over a few more things about the estate, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't stop thinking about how different things might have been if my dad had just spoken up sooner, if he had stood up for me instead of staying silent. Maybe we wouldn't be in this mess right now, but it was too late for all that, and there was nothing I could do to change the past. On my way back to the hotel, I got a call from Emma. She was really upset because, apparently, Grace had been saying some pretty nasty things about me around town. She was telling people that I was trying to steal the inheritance and that I was turning the family against her. I wasn't surprised, honestly. Grace always knew how to play the victim and make herself look like the innocent one, but it still hurt to hear that she was spreading lies about me. When I got back to the hotel, I decided to take a break from all the drama and spend some time with Emma. I picked her up, and we went out for dinner. We talked about everything that had been happening, and I tried to reassure her that none of this was her fault. She was just caught in the middle of all this, and I hated that she had to deal with it. But the next day, things took another turn for the worse. I woke up to a bunch of missed calls and texts from unknown numbers. At first, I thought it was just spam, but then I started reading the messages. They were all threatening, calling me names, and accusing me of trying to tear the family apart. Someone even said they were going to make me pay if I didn't back down. I had no idea who was behind it, but I had a feeling Grace's husband was involved. He had already threatened me once, and I wouldn't put it past him to try something like this. I forwarded everything to my lawyer, just in case things escalated. But honestly, it was starting to get really scary. It's one thing to deal with family drama, but when people start making threats, it's a whole other level. Later that afternoon, I went to my car, only to find that someone had slashed my tires, all 4 of them. I was completely freaked out at this point. I mean, who does that? I knew Grace and her husband were angry, but this felt way too extreme. It was like they were willing to go to any lengths to get what they wanted. I called the police and filed a report, but I didn't have much hope that they'd catch whoever did it. Still, I wasn't going to let them intimidate me. I was already dealing with enough, and the last thing I needed was to be scared every time I walked out the door. I talked to the hotel staff, and they beefed up security around the property, so that made me feel a little better. But it was clear this wasn't going to end anytime soon. A few days later, we had another meeting with the lawyer to finalize some things with the estate. Grace and her husband were there, and the tension in the room was thick. They barely said a word to me, but the glares they were giving me said enough. At the end of the meeting, Grace's husband pulled me aside and told me I was making a huge mistake by not giving up my share. He said I'd regret it and that this wasn't over. I didn't even bother responding, I just walked away. I wasn't going to let him scare me into doing something I didn't want to do. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of it. Grace and her husband weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted, and I had to be prepared for whatever came next. That night, I sat down and thought about everything that had happened since my dad passed. The lies, the threats, the vandalism. It was all so exhausting. I just wanted it to be over. I wanted to move on with my life and leave all this behind. But I knew that wasn't going to happen as long as Grace and her husband were around. Still, I wasn't going to give up. I'd been through too much to let them push me around now. They could make all the threats they wanted, but I wasn't backing down. This was my life, my inheritance, and I was going to fight for what was mine. And if they thought they could scare me into submission, they were in for a rude awakening. Update 2. Things didn't calm down after that last meeting with the lawyer. If anything, they got worse. Grace and her husband were getting more and more desperate, and honestly, it was starting to feel like I was in the middle of some bad movie. The threats kept coming. The nasty texts from random numbers didn't stop, and I was just mentally drained. One night, about a week after the tire slashing incident, I was heading back to the hotel after dinner with Emma. She had been staying over with me for a few days, which was honestly a relief. It was nice to have someone on my side in all this mess. We were walking through the lobby when I noticed this guy just standing there, watching us. At first I thought maybe he was just some random person waiting for someone, but when we passed by, he followed us. I tried not to freak out, but the whole situation had me on edge already. We got into the elevator, and as soon as the doors closed, I looked at Emma. "Did you see that guy?" I asked. She nodded, looking just as nervous as I felt. Yeah, he was staring at us. We got to our room, and I immediately called the front desk to report the guy. They said they'd check the cameras and send someone up to patrol the floor, but still, it didn't make me feel much better. This whole thing was getting way too close for comfort. I couldn't shake the feeling that Grace's husband was behind this somehow. I mean, who else would go to these lengths just to scare me? That night, I barely slept. Every little noise had me jumping out of bed, convinced someone was trying to break in or worse. It was like living in a nightmare, and all I could think about was how to make it stop. The next morning, I decided I needed to take some serious action. I called my lawyer and told him everything, about the threats, the weird guy in the lobby, the slashed tires. He agreed that things were getting out of hand and suggested we get a restraining order against Grace's husband. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but at that point, it felt like the only option. We filed the paperwork the next day, and I tried to keep my head down while we waited for the court date. But, of course, Grace and her husband didn't take the news well. The texts ramped up again, this time with more threats about how I'd regret this and how they'd make sure I paid for everything. It was exhausting, but I was done being scared. They could throw whatever they wanted at me, but I wasn't giving in. A few days later, the court date for the restraining order came around. I showed up with my lawyer, and guess who else was there? Grace and her husband, of course. They looked smug, like they thought this whole thing was a joke. I avoided eye contact with them, focusing on what my lawyer was saying, but I could feel their eyes on me the whole time. When the judge called us up, Grace's husband tried to act like I was the one causing all the drama. He said I was exaggerating everything, that I was just bitter about the inheritance and trying to make his life hell. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Like, really? He slashes my tires, sends me threats, and somehow I'm the one causing problems? Thankfully, the judge saw through his BS. After hearing both sides, they granted the restraining order, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a small sense of relief. At least now there was something in place to protect me if things got worse. But of course, things didn't magically get better overnight. The threats didn't stop right away, and I still felt like I was constantly looking over my shoulder. But at least now I had the law on my side, and that gave me some peace of mind. A few weeks passed, and I was finally starting to feel like maybe things were settling down. I was still staying in the hotel, but I had started looking for a new apartment where I could feel safer. Emma had gone back home, and I missed her, but we kept in touch constantly. She was still dealing with the fallout from all the family drama, but at least she wasn't stuck in the middle of it as much as I was. Then, one morning, I woke up to a message from an unknown number. It wasn't a threat this time, though. It was a link. I hesitated for a second before clicking on it, and what I saw made my stomach drop. Someone had created a whole website dedicated to trashing me. I'm talking lies, half-truths, and just pure nastiness. They were painting me as this selfish, greedy person who was tearing the family apart. There were even photos of me from the funeral, looking cold and heartless according to the captions. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This was next-level crazy. I immediately called my lawyer and sent him the link. He told me to screenshot everything, which I did, and then we started the process of getting the website taken down. It was just another reminder that Grace and her husband weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. But at this point, I was so tired I didn't even care what they threw at me anymore. I just wanted it to be over. That night, I talked to Emma again. She was upset about the website and wanted to help, but there wasn't much she could do. I didn't want her getting caught up in all this any more than she already was. We talked for a while, and she told me about how Grace had been acting like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't caused any of this. Typical Grace, always playing the victim. I went to bed that night feeling drained, but at least I had a plan in place. The website would get taken down, the restraining order was in effect, and I had people on my side. I wasn't alone in this, even though it felt like it sometimes. The next day, I woke up to an email from my lawyer saying the website had been taken down. Finally, some good news. It felt like a small victory in this endless battle, but I'd take what I could get. I knew Grace and her husband weren't going to give up easily, but at least now I had some control over the situation. As I sat in my hotel room that morning, sipping on my coffee and trying to wrap my head around everything that had happened, I realized something. I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry, yes, but the fear that had been hanging over me for weeks had started to fade. I wasn't going to let them control my life anymore. They could try all they wanted to drag me down, but I wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. Update 3. So, here we are at the final stretch, and I thought maybe things were going to finally settle down after the court win. But nope, my family drama had other plans. I mean, I knew Grace and her husband weren't going to back off that easily. But even I couldn't have guessed how far they'd take it this time. It started about 2 weeks after the court hearing. I was starting to feel a little more relaxed, like I could finally breathe again without constantly looking over my shoulder. I was even thinking about moving out of the hotel and into an apartment, something more permanent. But then, something weird happened. One morning, I got a package delivered to my hotel. It didn't have a return address, which should have been my first clue that something was off. I opened it up, and inside was this old, beat-up notebook. At first I thought it was just junk. Maybe someone sent the wrong package or something. But then I opened it up, and that's when things got creepy. The entire notebook was filled with handwritten notes about me. I'm talking pages and pages of scribbled messages, all about my life, my family, and even things about my dad's will. Some of the notes were dates and times of where I'd been, who I'd been with, even places I'd gone with Emma. Someone had been keeping tabs on me, and it was all laid out right there in front of me. I felt a chill go down my spine. Who would send me this? Was it some sort of twisted intimidation tactic from Grace's husband? I mean, they'd already tried the threats, the vandalism, even the weird phone calls, but this was different. This felt way more personal, like someone was watching me, tracking my every move. I called my lawyer immediately and sent him photos of the notebook. He was just as freaked out as I was and told me to report it to the police, which I did. They took the notebook as evidence, but I wasn't holding my breath for anything to come of it. The police had their hands full with a million other things, and honestly, I didn't think they'd figure out who was behind this anytime soon. After that, I tried to keep a low profile, staying in my hotel room most of the time and only going out when I absolutely had to. Emma was still calling me regularly, and she was worried too. She had no idea who could be behind the notebook either, but she suspected Grace's husband, just like I did. Then, one evening, as I was heading back to my room after grabbing some food, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. That same guy from the hotel lobby weeks ago, the one who had been watching Emma and me, was back. He was standing near the elevators, pretending to scroll through his phone, but he was definitely keeping an eye on me. I felt my heart start to race, but I played it cool. I walked right past him, pretending like I didn't notice anything, but I could feel his eyes on me the whole time. Once I got into my room, I locked the door and immediately called hotel security. They said they'd check the cameras and send someone up to do a sweep of the floor, but honestly, I didn't feel safe there anymore. I called Emma that night and told her everything. She was scared, which made me even more anxious. I hated that she was caught up in all this, that she had to deal with the fallout of Grace's mess. But I promised her I'd be careful, and we made a plan to meet up the next day so we could figure out what to do next. The following day, I met Emma at a cafe downtown, away from the hotel. We sat there for a couple of hours, talking about everything. She told me more about what had been going on with Grace at home, how she was acting like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just tried to take me to court over the will. It was infuriating, but it didn't surprise me. Then, Emma dropped something on me that I wasn't ready for. She said Grace's husband had been asking around about my whereabouts, trying to figure out where I was staying. That's when it hit me, the guy at the hotel, the notebook, all of it. They were keeping tabs on me, and they were probably planning something worse. I knew I couldn't stay at the hotel anymore. It wasn't safe, and if Grace's husband had people watching me, it was only a matter of time before things escalated. So that night, I packed up my things and checked out of the hotel. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even Emma, just in case. I booked a room at a different hotel on the other side of town, hoping that would throw them off for a while. The next couple of days were quiet. I didn't hear anything from Grace or her husband, and the weird texts and calls seemed to have stopped. But I wasn't letting my guard down. I knew better than that by now. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from my lawyer. He had some news that caught me completely off guard. Grace's husband had been arrested. Apparently, he'd been caught trying to break into my old hotel room. I didn't know what he was planning to do, but whatever it was, he got busted before he could follow through. I felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief that he was finally out of the picture, but anger that it had come to this. I mean, what kind of person goes that far just for some inheritance money? It was insane. The police told me they were investigating, and I'd probably have to go to court again to testify, but at least now I knew I was safe, at least for the time being. After that, things finally started to calm down. The police kept me updated on the case, and my lawyer was confident that Grace's husband wouldn't be able to pull anything like this again, not with the charges he was facing. I moved into a new apartment a few weeks later, somewhere Grace and her husband didn't know about. I kept in touch with Emma, of course, but I made sure she didn't tell anyone where I was living. I wasn't taking any chances. It's been a few months now, and while I'd like to say everything is back to normal, I don't think it ever will be. There's still a part of me that's always on edge, always looking over my shoulder, wondering if Grace or her husband will try something again. But for now, I'm just trying to move on with my life, to rebuild after everything they put me through. Looking back, I can't believe how far this all went. It started with Grace betraying me with my boyfriend, and somehow it escalated into threats, court battles, and restraining orders. But through it all, I've learned something important. I'm stronger than I ever thought I was, and no matter what, I'm never letting anyone take advantage of me again.